Hi, this is Andy with West Valley 411. In this segment I'm going to show you how to change the high pressure power steering hose in a 2005 Honda Odyssey. First thing you need to do is take off the engine cover. There's a couple of screws here, just turn them a quarter turn and take off the cover. There's going to be a little resistance initially because of these couple of tabs here that go over the far side of the engine hole right here. And there's the screw that we just turned. So we'll set that aside, and here gives a good visualization of the power steering hose. It's leaking right here between the rubber and the metal, and then it goes down and around the back side of the engine. And let me take a look at the flare nut that we're going to be trying to take out. This is the most difficult part of the job. You can see the multicolored parts down in the engine compartment here attaching to the power steering box, and trying to get this to focus a little better. There we go. So I've got a little magnetic pointer on the end there, and that is the nut that we're going to be trying to get off later. You've got to get to it from the underside of the vehicle unless you've got really long arms. So I'll try it with a flare nut wrench initially. If we can't get it off, we'll just cut it and then use a socket wrench, since we don't need to retain that old part for anything. So let me show you a little bit of the setup. I like to put my vehicle up on ramps and support it with some blocks, just in case there's a little metal fatigue and the ramp slips or the car drops. And I support that with a 2x6 because those ramps kind of slide on my garage floor. I'm trying to keep my garage floor clean, so underneath I got some plastic in case there's excessive oil that's dripping, and some cardboard there so I get a little bit of a firm base. Alright, let's see how much this job costs. First, let's look at the part. I decided to go with original Honda parts. This one lists for $250. I asked him to do a online match. He said the lowest he can go is $160, and that's what I got it for. And here's a how much the original power steering fluid costs, and that's what the 12 ounces looks like. So that's the part cost. The job cost at the shop was going to be $481, so we're going to save about $300. This is what the part looks like. There's the number. The toughest part of the job is getting off this nut here at the end that connects to the power steering box. And essentially we're going to try it one of two ways. I'm going to use a flare nut wrench, which looks like this. Compared to a regular wrench, it's got 6 points of attachment pressure used to turn that nut. Otherwise you might strip it with a traditional wrench. So let me pick that up and see if we can fit it. And as you'll see, you cannot get this wrench on by pushing it over the nut. You've got to put it on top of the tube and then slide it on the end, and then turn it that way. So, and then if we're not able to unloosen it because it's too tight, we're just going to use a long socket wrench. I've got both 1/4 inch and 3/8 here. You can see the difference. And then I just have a saw tool that I'm going to use to cut it. It looks like it's fairly straightforward. We're not going to need to retain the old part, so we'll just cut it. Alright, there's a couple of bushings here along the back side of the vehicle. These are, looks like they're about 90 degrees, so it came that way. I don't know if I'm going to need to turn them, but we'll see on the back side of the engine mount what we're going to need to do. There's another bushing here along the side. there's a bracket on the back side of the engine that holds that in place, and then there's already an O-ring on the top side. I've got an extra pair of rubber gloves in case I need them, and then you can always get vinyl gloves at Walmart if you need them. The first step is to remove the remaining power steering fluid from your reservoir, and as you can see, mine's pretty low. I took some of the fluid out already, but what I like to do is just use a turkey baster, squeeze out the air, set it down inside, and then let it rise up into your turkey baster. Put all the fluid in a container, and you can use that again later, or you can put in new power steering fluid. So let's take a look at the brackets around the back side. You can see right there's a silver colored bracket around the power steering hose. So that's the first bracket to remove, and the other two are around the back side. So let's take a look at that, and we'll get the hose removed. Alright, before we get under the car, why don't we remove these two 10mm nuts here. They're pretty easy to get off, and then if there's any fluid that comes out, you want to get that with some rags or paper towels. So this comes off pretty easy. This is probably the easiest part of the whole job. I don't like to spend a whole lot of time on the video showing each and every thing because it takes too much time and it gets to be kind of long, but I thought I'd show you a couple of the parts just so you're aware of how to do it. Alright, so you're going to get some residual fluid on there. Let me get a paper towel or old sock so it doesn't get dirty. And you can kind of clean that up. Try not to get any paper towel in the hole. I'll just cover it so no dirt gets inside. And then we'll focus on that bracket in the back. That's going to require me to reach, and I won't be able to hold the camera. So we'll take that off, and then we'll get under the vehicle and go from there. A little better light on that hose nut there. It's golden color compared to the black line. And that's what we're going to be trying to release. And then the other two nuts are, just adjust my light here. As I mentioned, one of them is right here. That's the one nut, and the other is over here. So let's get those two taken off. Okay, I got the one nut off, and I don't know if you can see this, but it's got a lock washer and a regular washer as part of the attachment. So I'll show you how we get that other one off. I've got my 3/8" ratchet up here, and it's surprisingly easy to take off. It's kind of a blind spot, but you can get your finger on it first. Okay, we got the two nuts out. I just want to show you how easy it is to get this bracket off. The nut comes in this way parallel to the ground, and then you just lift it off, and that's what it looks like. The one next to it is attached in this fashion, and it keeps it tied down so it doesn't rattle around. So you just lift that off. So the last one that we have to do is that flare nut. And it's kind of like doing your taxes. You do everything else that you don't want to do to avoid the taxes. So you clean under the fridge, you clean your sock drawer, and then ultimately you got to do the job. So I have a bunch of other things that I brought to kind of visualize some of the parts, but I haven't seemed to need it. So here's a kind of mirror extendable tool, and I haven't needed it, but just like Clint Eastwood said in El Camino, you know, you don't acquire all your tools at once. So if this flare nut wrench doesn't work, at least I have it for another job. Pressure sensor needs to be removed, and it's pretty straightforward. Stick your hand up just on the other side of the carriage, and there's a little tab right here on top that you just have to press in with your thumb, and then the harness slides off, and all you need to do is twist off that pressure sensor, put it on the new part, and reverse the process. Alright, you're one step closer. Let's get that nut off, and then we'll snake the pressure hose back up to the top, put the pressure sensor on, and reverse the process. Got my flare nut wrench around the nut, and unfortunately the rotation of the nut is in the position where I just cannot advance the nut because of the frame of the vehicle. So I tried turning it around, which is pretty easy to do, and I can get it around it, but I just cannot pull down enough on this until it hits the frame of the car. And when I try to advance the wrench up a little bit higher, I just can't grab the hex on that nut, unfortunately. If I could, what I would do is take my second wrench and interlock it like this, and then I would pull down. But as you can see, I got nowhere to go, so I'm just going to have to cut the line. Okay, I wanted to show you the progress on cutting the metal part of the hose with my hacksaw. You can see as I zoom in, it's been successfully cut, and it took about 100 strokes or so with the blade. I was able to reach my hand down there with no problem. I've got a rag catching most of the oil. It did drip somewhat. Just as a precaution, I put a oil change pan underneath and some rags, but nothing really dripped. So looks like we're in pretty good shape. Okay, now that the metal tube is cut, it's time to take off that nut from the housing. So I've got my 14mm socket and about a 4-inch extension. So we're just going to unloosen that. And you can see the ratchet spinning. Let me kind of peek. Okay, yeah, it's coming out okay. We'll have to make sure we don't cross thread when we tighten it. Of course, we'll have to use the flare wrench to tighten it because I won't have a socket. Okay, that's coming out pretty easy now. See if I can do the rest by hand. Yeah, that comes out pretty easy. And I got a little present on the end. That's the part that we cut. So far so good. Let's head over to the remove parts and put that pressure regulator back on. Alright, the Honda replacement part matches up pretty well with the one that we took off the car. So you can see from the end there, this is the piece that we cut. Here's the 14mm nut, and here's our flare nut wrench we're going to use. I'm a little concerned that we're going to be able to tighten that up as much as necessary, but I have a couple of different angles we can come from reversing the process, so that should work out well. The pressure regulator has an O-ring on it as well. I'm just going to take a little bit of power steering fluid and lube that up and then tighten that up, and you can get that off with a 17mm wrench. So we'll put that back into the new part here, and then we'll reverse the process. Okay, I had a little bit of a challenge getting the bolt back on that bushing bracket, and I've had to use a mirror on the end of an extension wand because there's a little tab on the left side of that bolt that has to fit into the frame, and then you have to align the hole exactly to get it started by hand. So if I didn't have this mirror, it'd be a bit of a challenge. You'd be playing around and you might be, you know, a 1/16 of an inch off. So it's taken me about 15 minutes just to get this this one bolt back on. Okay, I got the bracket tightened in the back, and it looks like the purpose of that bracket is to keep the hose off the heat of the engine. Got the 10mm bolts tied down to the tightened up to the end of the hose back of the power steering pump, and last thing I'm going to do is fill the reservoir full of fresh powering steering fluid, because these lines are all empty, so I may need more than the 12 ounces that came with the in the container. So the last thing that I'll be doing is tightening up the that nut that I'm trying to get this light adjusted. Last thing I'll be doing is tightening up that nut that puts the end of the metal part of the hose back into the housing there. I could only get like a 1/16 of a turn with that flare wrench, so I decided to use a standard 14-inch wrench after finger tightening it, and I got it most of the way. So I'll put the flare nut wrench on that, tighten it down clockwise, so I'll be pulling it from back to front, and I've got enough space to do that. And then we'll come back, we'll start the engine up, and you know, that power steering whine that caused you to replace this hose should be gone, and we'll be good to go. Alright, I got that nut tightened up real nice. Fortunately, I was able to put the flare wrench on there and then interlock it for the last 1/8 or 1/16 of a turn. So now let's put some power steering fluid back in the reservoir. So this is a 12-ounce container, and this has been the challenge during this entire video, is videotaping and working at the same time. So let's see if I can, let me switch hands here. Let's see how much it takes to get the reservoir full. And can we see that filling up? Yes. So it was totally empty. Right now I'm at the minimum line, and now I'm at the full line. I'm going to go a little bit more. In fact, well, I got a little bit left in the container. So let me start the engine up, circulate that, and we'll come back and finish up. Alright, let's start the car and see how it sounds. Wow, that fluid got sucked up pretty quick. Look at that, it's all the way down below the low fill line, but the whine is gone. Outstanding. Let's see if there's any leaks. I'm looking down. See how close we can get. No leaks. So I hope that's been helpful. I'll fill that reservoir up a little bit further, and when I pull the car off the ramp, I need to move the steering wheel lock to lock, both sides, 4 times to make sure that the all the air is out of the system. And you can kind of see the fluid circulating back into this reservoir. It isn't quite full, so I'll have to go back to the dealer. Hopefully a few tips that I've shared during the video will help you change your own power steering hose. And just as an epilogue, we're going to come outside, look into the garbage can, and here's some of the trash, and our power steering hose is going to go out to the landfill to sit forever. Thank you for watching.